Hello, everybody, and welcome to our eighth or ninth conversation this semester for our Digital Art and Literature course together with Professor Élika Ortega. And today we're very happy to have Joana Moll, a fabulous artist, come and visit us. We'll be having a little conversations with her, and yeah, we'll get right into it. So, well, thank you for coming, Joana.
Thanks
Thank
for
you,
the
Joanna.
invitation. No, thank you.
And I'm going to read a short bio and then we'll start with some questions. So, for all of you who don't know, Joana Moll, she's a Barcelona and Berlin based artist and researcher. Her work critically explores the way between techno capitalist narratives and how they affect the alphabetization of machines, humans, and ecosystems. So, these are all topics we've been discussing largely this class. Her main research topics include the internet materiality, surveillance, social profiling, and interfaces, all very familiar topics to us. She has presented her work in renowned institutions, museums, universities, and festivals around the world, such as, and this is a long list, so brace yourselves, the Venice Biennale, Maxi, MoMA, Laboral, CCCB, CKMM, Bossar, Ars Electronica, HEK, Photographers Gallery, Korean Cultural Foundation Center. She's been all around the world. Kronos Art Center, the University of Cambridge, Goldsmith University of London, University of Illinois, now Berkeley, Boulder, uh, ETC Zurich, the École d'Art, gosh, my French, the École d'Art de in Provenance, British Computer Society, the New School, CPDP 2019, Transmedial, File, and ISEA, among many others. Her work has been featured also extensively on international media, including the Financial Times, Der Spiegel, the National Geographic, Quartz, Vice, Wired, the New Enquiry, El Mundo, La República, Fast Company, CBC, NBC, and the MIT Press. So she's quite a big deal. She's also co founder of the Critical Interface Politics Research Group at Hangar in Barcelona and the co founder of the Institute of the Advancements of Popular Automatisms with our beloved Eugenio Tiselli. So you guys will be familiar with this work. She's currently a visiting lecturer at the Universitat Potsdam and La Escola Superior d'Arte Vic in Barcelona. So, welcome.
Thank
And
you.
I think, thank you. And Elika is going to have some questions for you.
All
I'm going to
right.
start with the questions. Thank you, Joanna. It's really a pleasure to talk to you and to have you in this conversation. Um,
Likewise.
Thank you. So let's begin with the question. So your work is all digital, but obviously it has a deliberate emphasis on material infrastructures, on the way they relate to institutions and commercial enterprises on the one hand, and the way these exist also on the earth and affect the environment on the other. Can you tell us a little bit about these interests?
Uh, wow, that's a great question. I mean, generally, short questions are very tough. um,
We are good at questions, apparently.
no, it's okay. I
We've
mean,
been
I
taught.
think, I think it's really, for me, it was always very important to understand how things work since I was a little girl, really. So when you start digging in and you start wondering how things work, how computers work, how the internet work, it always comes to materiality and it always comes to revealing much larger complex systems that we're all part of. But they are deeply misunderstood at large. So I don't think you can research technology or the effects of technology without taking into account its material reality, extractivist practices, labor practices, gender
Hmm.
issues, social issues, and so on. I mean, we are part of a very large complex systems, and it's very hard to understand them because as Western science has taught us, everything has to be I can't pronounce this
Compartmentalized.
Yeah.
exactly. In order and isolated.
Compartamentalizado, sí. Yes.
Exacto. No,
Uh-huh.
it's a tough one, eh? In
It
It is.
is.
order in order to acquire understanding of the world. So you isolate all these things in order to understand the world, but it's important to understand the world without tracing the connections that exist between things. So,
Hmm.
in a nutshell, that's why I'm doing, or I'm exploring things that way because it just you cannot separate them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
And this is actually a good way to think about the relation that is in your work between geography and geopolitics. And I'm particularly thinking of projects like Algorithms Allowed or the Virtual Watchers, which there's it's almost a truism in popular culture to say that the internet is deterritorialized. That so
That's a
what do
difficult
you
one to say.
yes, it is deterritorialized. So
No, but it's perfect.
so what do you think are the operating notions between place, locality, nation, country in the internet?
Uh, could you reformulate the question? I'm not
Yes,
sure I
yes. I
understood
mean,
exactly.
there's a tension between the common experiencing of the internet as something that is deterritorialized without a place, or that extends between places, right? And then there's also the part of your work that emphasizes the relationship between geography or geopolitics, the
Hmm.
idea of the local, the nation, for example, that gets challenged in this way of thinking the internet as an post space, if you want to say.
Yeah.
So can you talk about, or maybe Élika wants to also like
Can
express
I
this
add
question
something?
better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was
I
thinking,
mean,
for
I understood
example,
it. No,
okay, I was thinking, for example, of the virtual watchers very much with this question, where it is this idea of crowdsourcing, and but at the same time, it is very much about the border between the U.S. and Mexico, and it is about all the cameras that are physically located in people's houses, or I don't know, lampposts or whatever it is they are. So there
Mhm.
is like this idea of something that is quote unquote available to all the world, but it is extremely localized and
Yes.
extremely contained in this border conflict that is so pervasive.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks. It's also a tough one, but it's a pretty good one. Yeah. No, because when somebody asks you about your work, right, you tend to ask totally different questions that the people that, or you think that you reflect things that are not what people get, and it's really interesting to understand what
Mm.
people understand about your work and how they see it. So I really appreciate that.
You can
So
also
yeah,
tell us like, no, that's totally wrong.
no, it's true, because there exists this tension, right? Of I think my work's like bringing things down to earth. Yeah, and it's like,
Mm.
okay, guys, things are like that, like the internet thought is a super space that it's just it even feels like it's just another planet. Well, it feels like it's a cloud, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
not even on Earth. It's just up there, and it's really
Mm-hmm.
nothing. And I think the narrative of the cloud has been quite damaging to
Mm-hmm.
understand, or again what I said, to acquire like a complex understanding of what reality is. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And indeed, I mean, with the virtual watchers and Algorithms Allowed, there are two great examples of that. Whereas services that are transnational, yeah, that they go across borders, they do have an implication in the
Mm-hmm.
places that this is being happening, or
Mm-hmm.
even like events that trigger certain things that go transnational, in the shape of data, whatever, they've been triggered in a very contextualized place. Um, so indeed, yeah, it's something that it's quite central in my work, even though I don't really talk about this most of the times, but it is indeed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's so, I mean, it's so interesting to think about the different scales of space. Like, I mean, right now, like we're in Berkeley, in Denver, in Barcelona, and it's like, uh, this super space, and at the same time, obviously we're all sitting in some room in our houses, and this the scales, they're just like mind-blowing and difficult to reconciliate. So that's something that I love about your work, not just in the kind of like the personal domestic levels that we live in now, but like the hugely political implications that it has.
Well, yes,
um
the sort of the reckoning
mhm,
uh, of the, let's say, the different spaces that are operating, right? And the
Hmm.
reckoning of your, again, we're participating in this, not really knowing what's happening, because I don't know how Zoom is doing anything that it's doing. I don't know where this information is going. I don't know where this is being stored. I don't know. So all these things are really, really poignant in your work for sure. Yeah. Anyways,
mhm.
Elika.
So the next question moves us more to the environmental dimensions of your work, which are really just amazing. And we're particularly interested in the relationship between, again, local action and global impact, and vice versa. And you have there's two works that that you have done that are very, very well known in every place that Alex and I work, I think. That is CO2 Go and Deforest. And they both really yes, sorry for the mispronunciation. That's a tough one too, you see. Lots of tough words in this conversation. And they both function as, and we think about them as visual revelations of the impact of the internet on the climate. Can you tell us a little bit about these works? And I guess in particular, if that is something that sounds good to you, um, what is it that you're trying to expose about the connection between actions and consequences?
So when I first came up with CO2 Go, it was in 2013, even though I produced it in 2014 because, well, it took me a while to research all this stuff. But I remember I was at home, I was sitting in my computer, and suddenly something made click in my brain, like, this cannot come for free, you know, like all these searches that I did today, all these websites and so on. And after 1 second, I felt so stupid. It's like, of course, of course not. Of course, this has to be very polluting, or anyway, it has to, it needs a lot of energy to operate. But somehow till that very moment, and it's just 2013, it's not so long ago, right? And then I was really worried that this connection wasn't embedded at all in the social imagination. And I felt this was really, really critical to put it up there because it wasn't nowhere. It couldn't even be a public discussion because people didn't even think about it. So CO2 Girl, it really starts from this urge of making this connection. And the piece is very silly. It's very simple. I did it in, I don't know, 20 minutes after I gathered all the information. It's not, I was sitting in the sofa at my brother's place. He just had the second baby and I was taking care of my other nephew. I think it's the first time I explained this publicly. So I was just in the sofa.
Primicia mundial.
No, it's fun because I was just singing, lingering in the sofa, and I just said, I'm going to do this because I didn't really know what to do with all the information I got. Obviously, after wondering this, I started to check and I got some studies. Actually, the reference I'm using to calculate the CO2 emission, it is based on a paper that was published in Berkeley in 2008.
Yes.
So it's still, I mean, it's very, very hard to calculate this, and it's almost impossible. And that's like the problem of the infrastructures that we use at large, that it's just impossible to understand the amount of energy or emissions that they emit. And I think it's really problematic. But okay, this is a little bit of topic sort of now. So this was the main aim. And with the forest, I went a step further. I released it in 2016. I released it that far because I was very focused on the producing the virtual watchers, which took me a few years. And with the forest, again, I did it in 30 minutes, sort of, after I understood what I wanted to do. So I felt with the CO2 Girl, even though it was very effective in communicating this link, it didn't tell much about what this represented. Because I have problems with numbers in the sense that I explained a lot in terms of, okay, this is going very fast, this is a lot, this is not going down, it's just increasing, etc., etc. But as a human, as a flesh, you don't really understand what 500,000 tons of CO2 represent, yeah, and what are the implications, material implications, environmental implications, and how this comes back to you. And with the first, I tried to reverse this and try to use trees in order for the user or public to understand what this means, right? So you have like all these 23 trees per second, which on average, and it's really, really estimated average, that it would take, it's a 23, you only 23 trees per second to absorb all the emissions derived from the global visits to google.com. And then I feel like people get much more in shock when they see that than when they see Google. With the CO2 World, they get very surprised, but with the forest, they get quite scared. And there is something physical that's happening to it. So that was the main reason.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, there's
But it
a
Excellent.
was
certain anxiety in this,
yeah,
image that keeps replicating. The screen starts scrolling. You're not really sure if it's gonna end. I think I did the math at the time, so there should be like a million something at some point, according to the numbers you give there. And and I was like, but I'm not gonna sit here to see that. It's making me really anxious.
yeah,
I want to shut the browser down because, there's also something about the lack of control and the agency participating in the
Mm-hmm.
production of this energy, right? You feel
Yes.
like, okay, you're turning this uh machine on, and the piece starts working. Can I turn it off? Does my actual turning it off make any impact? So it has a very powerful, effective response, definitely. And I think that it's very valuable as a piece like that. um
thank
so
you.
no, yes, and also there's something about the fact that trees, of course, they're always rooted somewhere. So they're always,
Mm-hmm.
an in flesh, not in flesh, but an, I don't know, embarked reality, that it is rooted somewhere in particular. And yet they do produce something that is universal and that can be explored anywhere, right? I mean, oxygen. It's a resource that we all need. And then it does travel through the world. I'm thinking of, these things about um, the Amazon being the lungs of the planet, things like that, right?
Yeah,
But they are yet focused in a particular country that has policing and regulations over those trees that seem to be like a resource of the earth and things like that. How do we relate to that from other parts of the world? How does the impact here in Berkeley, polluting something, have in the globe? So this is also about the tension between the local and the earth that is, you know,
yeah,
very
true that.
effectively.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
indeed. It's true. I never focus as much as in that perspective, which is it's really interesting indeed.
Yeah, and it becomes very powerless, right? Like when as a viewer, you think, gosh, I
Yeah,
can't
yeah,
do
yeah.
anything about it.
And
We do.
on
So,
the flip side, wait. And on the flip side, there's like, in the life of the Amazon user, where there's that button that is, got a project, and this project uses how much carbon, it has the opposite effect. I was going over some of your works this morning before having the conversation, and it's almost, I mean, it's the opposite, because it reclaims that agency of, like,
mm,
the to push or not to push the button kind of thing. um but it becomes a decision rather than just an impulse that you follow.
mm,
So
yeah.
it is a very interesting tension between how some of your works like make you aware of the lack of agency, and others totally the opposite.
Yeah, and
Anyway.
I think this has to
Hmm.
do maybe we can put it in terms of energy and labor, which is what our
Mm-hmm.
next question had to do. And we were thinking a lot about the exploitation of internet users' energy and labor, and keeping in the forest with the idea that the trees are actually producing labor, right? The labor of trees and the environment. And you put this front and center in many of your works. So what is all this labor and tons of energy doing? And the other part of the question would be to think about, aside of governmental regulation, which may never come or may never be enough, or if it does, what is it going to be? How can energy and labor be claimed away from tech companies and political actors? So
That's
fix the world for us, Joanna. Go on.
I will try. There is a very, very good text that talks exactly about that. You know, Ivan Illich. I don't know how you pronounce it. Yeah, you know him, right? Have you read Energy and Equity essay?
I don't think
I
I
He's
have.
haven't.
talking. So
Mm-hmm.
it's really, really, it exactly tackles this, and it's actually the starting point of the hidden life of an Amazon user. You know, it
Mm-hmm.
really inspired it. So he's talking a lot about the one who's going to be like true equity if we don't regulate energy, and exactly if like energy is not in the hands of these supranational powers. Yeah. And also, well, he talks about the energy slave, and well, it's a really, really interesting essay. I really recommend it to the students. So and and it's not that long. So, and you can find it in English as well as in Spanish. So I think it's like the problem. I don't know. It's a really complex problem, but I think that one of the things that has to be heavily regulated is who owns infrastructure that allows the energy flows to exist. I mean, in terms of energy flows that they have to be served flavor, right? And yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about the case of Amazon. Yeah, it's a very complicated question. I need to think a bit about it. Because, okay, let's put it like that. I will use the metaphor of the interface. You will need to edit this interview. I'm sorry.
We never do. So this is all as it is.
It's fine.
So, for example, when I gave a lot of workshops, critical interface workshops, right? And what we do is like all these exercises on how to use less energy when we use and build a website. So I also, a lot of times I ask my students to work with a limited energy budget, right? And you have a limited energy budget, and then you need to play with it. Either you want to use everything in your own as a user, you want to split it and use or build a website as a community. I mean, you can do whatever, right? But when you put like this energy budget in the forefront of everything, all the other relationships change, and it's really, really interesting how this happens. So I don't know how to solve it, but I think that we take energy for granted, and
Yes.
it seems like energy doesn't have any right on its own. It is, especially when it comes to labor and manpower, human power. I prefer to you call it human power.
Human.
Not manpower. Why should it be manpower, right? um, and we just it just used and used, but it doesn't. We don't even consider this energy, or we don't really understand how this energy is being put at the service of capital and being exploited, and how we could just retain some agency about our own energy, right? And I think that we should be able to put this in the forefront before changing anything else, because we don't tend to think about it that way. And this is something that in the hidden life of the Amazon user I also wanted to bring to life. Yeah, that it's not just the energy that we are sucking, but it's also the energy that we are giving. Yeah, and all this disparity of energy uses also think they have like heavy implication in the environment, in unbalancing the environment in many ways. Like the less manpower, the human power we use, the more external energy we use. I'm going a little bit off topic. I'm navigating between thoughts. I'm sorry, but yeah, I think like this asymmetry of energy use, it has a direct implication in climate change, indeed.
Yes, I mean, and it is definitely related in things that we've been talking a lot lately in the underpinning sort of mechanisms and within capital, the necessity to cheapen the idea of nature, right? But also, so creating an abstraction of nature that becomes a concept that can be cheapened, so it can be exploited and accumulated. But it also has to do with the cheapening of human labor, right? By creating some abstract labor that is not paid, that can make other, human, in this case now I'm going to actually say man, because there's a big difference, that will be, retaining power in that uneven balance. So it is necessary for capital to function, to have this cheapening, right? This is what Jason Moore talks about when he talks about cheap nature. And I mean, it is definitely very clear in there. So it needs a big transformation of a big system that is so complex.
And it's also symbolic. And this is something that we have been discussing with the students a lot, how these conceptualizations, before they become material, are of a symbolic nature. and therefore kind of like where, like that is really the locus where art and philosophy and so on can really make an important intervention um, to think with different understandings of things. And we were discussing Haraway the other day, and this idea of, you know, it matters. I'm not gonna say it right, I don't think. It matters what thoughts think thoughts.
Think thoughts.
It matters what stories tell stories. It matters what
Relations relate relations, and what worlds
yes.
worlds.
There you go. You memorized
Yeah.
it better than I did.
I do, because
It's
it's
becoming
like
the
my
new
mantra.
mantra.
I go to bed and I'm like, it matters what thoughts think thoughts. Well, it is a question of representation. So when at the very beginning of this conversation, Joanna said that this didn't fit the imaginary, right? This was not a
Yes,
conversation that we could
exactly.
have because there was no tools,
To think.
mental tools, right?
Yeah.
There's no way to break from those representations of the world. So emphasizing on what Joanna's work is, which is highly representative in a symbolic way that translates into material impact, I think is a very effective way to affect this. Again, I'm going to use Haraway string figures of ways of thinking. So yeah, next question, because we're taking a long time.
No, it's okay. But I think like the energy issue, it's central. It's really central. And actually, one of my future projects is going to look into that direction. Yeah.
Mm.
Excellent.
Oh, exciting.
Yes,
Right?
yes. For the
Yeah,
next
maybe it
class.
will take me like 5-6 years. That will see.
It's okay. I don't know if the world still stands. We'll look forward
Indeed.
to it.
We'll be teaching it then. Yes. Um, so very, you know, very closely related to all of this, we only managed to have like really interesting webs of connection in the conversations, in how they move towards the thing that we want to discuss. So a few weeks ago, as we were telling you earlier, we talked to Eugenio Tiselli, and one of the central concepts we discussed was the idea of algorithmic politics, which is also present in your work and your research interest. We can also see it in, you know, your collaborations with Eugenio in the Institute of for the Advancement of Popular Automatisms, and before that on Arizona Move and Get Shot. So what can you tell us about the relationship of your work to this algorithmic culture and social politics?
Oh, wow, there is a lot of relation. I mean, I'm trying to reveal how much agency these algorithms have, which indeed is what basically allows them, enables them to govern us in many ways. Also, it's in many projects, it's what you mentioned, but also in the workshops I give, the critical interface, it's also central part of it. And yeah, it's all these invisible forces or agencies that just drive most of the decisions and even the movements or the narratives that articulate our life day to day. Yeah, we really have to remember that most of our daily transactions are executed through an interface. I mean, most of them. I mean, now this is a complete and the way, even the way that we're having this conversation, right? The way we are sitting, the way we had to connect, the things that we had to think just to make this possible was absolutely determined by a bunch of algorithms that work together. Yeah, if we talk about the global economy, how financial markets work, well, we see so what happened in 2008 and what's coming also, right? And there's a bunch of decisions of algorithms that they just operate at a much faster pace that we can't understand. And I think the issue of energy is very present here. Yeah. So indeed, it's really important. Now I'm developing a new project. I should be able to release it by March, which talks about the energy consumption and how to give agency to the user when it comes to online tracking, especially when it comes to analytics. Yeah, so I'm just trying to sort of frame this and and come up with some strategy that could allow users to revert this. But it's really, I'm reverting this really with the we call it with the issue of energy in the forefront. Yeah, that this is gonna be like the moneda de cambio. I don't know how, change coin,
exchange
coin?
value, maybe.
Yeah,
value.
something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, it's a bit complex to understand like that if I don't explain fully the project, but I can't do it yet. But yes, indeed, it's really central.
And I think you've talked a little bit about this implicitly because, well, it's been in all your answers, but I want to end the conversation with a different sort of a different emphasis, and it's in your own process. And how do you see the relationship between research and creativity when you put those at work, right? You're a researcher, you're also an artist. How do you think these two areas inform each other in the production of your work and and what you put out in the work, in the world?
For me, it's a relationship that I couldn't tell when one starts and the other one ends. They totally support each other. I mean, the more facts or things I know, let's say it's coming from the research side, the more I can think of how to give shape to other things. Yeah. And then there is more research and there is more questions, and I don't know, the way my thinking process, and I think that's probably why I'm an artist. I tend to see things very visually in order to understand them, like even in my head. Yeah. And then I formulate this hypothesis, and then I try to just, confirm it through exhaustive research and so on. But it really comes to the graphic phase. So like the image, I have an image of how things work and or certain hypotheses. And research is just crucial to me, as art or the creative practice is crucial to understand and to output these projects very
Yet
much.
the output is never a scholarly essay, and that's, I think, something really
Never.
interesting,
Yeah.
right? Because there's something that you're saying in a way. Again, you're putting a representation of the world that puts implicit the need to think differently about these problems of the world that are in a way the product of this type of scholarly thinking, because that's also a type of representation of the world that is also based on a bunch of abstractions of knowledge about the world. So there's something about the connections, about, we're talking a lot about affect, and I think this is, an emotion in these works, and like the senses that are involved in understanding your work. That, I mean, and I don't want to sound again esoteric, as it seems like we
No.
end up all these talks being like, we need magic, we need
My work is
shamans,
highly
we need,
esoteric.
but there is
And my
something,
creative
right?
processes also.
There's something there that I think is very valuable in thinking, again, in using different ideas and different thoughts to think different thoughts. That is
Yeah,
also a political stand.
The effective matter is, I think, where the the split becomes between reading, doing scholarly research, and doing creative practice, because it's very few scholars and that engage in an effective kind of like prose or those kinds of things, and then that in itself is a different kind of scholarly practice that gets more on the creative side than on the just purely academic.
But also, I think it's really like, of course, I wrote papers and published articles and stuff, but it's a complete different mindset. I mean, when I'm writing articles, papers, I can't think visually. It's just like pure thoughts, structured thoughts, all the reference in the place, please Chicago style, and all these things.
Yes.
And it's really something else. You can it's a different way of structuring thought, and the format, you cannot, I mean, you can gamble with ideas and thoughts, but the format, it's very stiff, which puts you in a, I mean, it's what you said, right? And it's, but when I'm allowing the other parts to like come in, then thoughts become much more plastic, and you start to think differently. And it is indeed like one of the things I think I do, sort of not so much directly, but I think it's indirectly, it's exactly to point things from other perspectives, and then so to position yourself, your mind, your body, everything, right, from to turn it in a little in a way, and so you acknowledge reality differently. It's a small portion of reality, and it's like a small turn,
Yes.
right? But it's like very subtle turns that open other windows, let's say, to navigate through things differently. I don't know, but I really think I open like very tiny gates, you know.
You do, and they're not tiny.
No, but it is. But the
No.
movement is very subtle. I think it's not like a massive. You have to
Right.
look at
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
It's
Yes. Yeah. No, but yeah,
or
really,
maybe
like
I'm wrong. I don't know. It's very hard
I
to
mean,
talk about or your own
You're
practice. It's
not,
really,
you
really
absolutely
hard.
can't be
no, but
wrong about your own ideas, your own work.
no,
So,
of course not. But
Oh,
I
that's
mean,
sure.
it's yeah, obviously it's a different perspective. But like the way we work with your work is really as extremely expansive. Even if it's small interventions, the effect and the affect of it is is just incredibly impressive.
Sounds
yes,
very happy
we're big
because
fans.
you.
Yeah, we're big
Thank
fans.
you.
So on that note, I think we're gonna end this conversation, opening gates and allowing for new connections to happen. So thank you so much
Thank you,
for
Joanna.
joining us today.
Thank you.
And
Yeah, thank you. It
yes,
was a pleasure. It's really a pleasure to hear other people talking about your work. For me, it's like a luxury. It's really amazing. So thanks again.
well, hopefully the conversation will keep on happening. Bye for
Yes.
I
now.
hope